Hey, it's Baldy from ADVRider, and Apple gave me early access to the first 10 episodes of The Long Way Up with Charley Boorman and Ewan McGregor, and I loved it. And they also let me hang out with Charley for 45 minutes and ask him questions, and I recorded that, so let's see it. Well, welcome, Charley. It's great to meet you. I feel like I already know you after all the episodes I've watched. Apple let me watch.
There's a lot of them around. I mean, there's Long Way Round, Long Way Down, there's Long Way Up, and I don't know, there's like 5 or 6 other ones that are out there on another streaming channel, which I won't talk about.
Oh, yeah. Well, I watched some of those. I did a search, and there's a lot of them. That
Yeah, I know.
I
always joke with my children. I always say, look, I mean, they're not so children anymore. They're 23 and 24. But when they were younger, I say, look, if you're naughty, I'm going to force you to sit down and watch my TV shows. And say, they go, no, Daddy, please don't.
Well, I got swept away in them yesterday. So Apple has let me see 10 episodes of Long Way Up. Yeah, and it was really great. And I was getting a little nervous towards the end because I was thinking, are they just going to flash through Mexico or what's going on? But you left me hanging. There's another episode or 2, and so I can't wait to see it. But
oh no, well, listen. Well, thank you for trudging through so many episodes.
No, I loved it. It was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it. They I mein, when you make them yourselves, and you and I have done a couple, and this is our third. You try and do whatever you do, and then just hope somebody might watch them. So, and I'm always eternally grateful.
Well, somebody just watched them. I loved them. I watched every minute. In fact, I watched episode 1 over again. And
oh, wow.
So, yeah, they were really great. And a couple of times I had to back up a little bit. Like when you were at the Panama Canal and you asked, what's the toll booth cost? And she said 1.2 million. I thought, what? I heard that. I must have heard that wrong. And
No, it is. It's extraordinary, isn't it? That's But what I didn't realize with the Panama Canal. I mean, I know we're sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, but they actually have to be competitive with the Suez Canal and with the price of oil. So they're always looking at what the Suez Canal is doing, what the price of oil is. So if the price of oil drops down, a lot of boats will go around. South America and not go through the canal. So they've done this tariff now where they'll charge a lot of money. That 1.2 million was for a ship that was totally full. But then what they'll do is in order to keep the business, they will charge just an empty rate on the way back. So encourages them to go through and then come through again. So it was fascinating.
Yeah,
anyway,
fascinating.
We digress.
Yeah, we do digress. So who came up with this idea to do a third? How did it happen when you and Ewan started talking again?
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of mentioned it a little bit on the beginning of the show that Ewan and I did Long Way Down about 12 years ago, and when you make these trips, like when we did Long Way Round, the first one, we you just every journey has its lifespan, and you have your beginning, middle, end, and as you get towards the end of one of these big trips that you're doing, part of you really wants to go home and be part of your family again, but there's a little bit inside your heart that would be quite happy to just turn around and do the whole thing again. But then I think you start talking about doing another one, which kind of helps you stop the one that you're on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we did that for Long Way Round, and then at the end of Long Way Down, we always said it would be lovely to do a third one up through South America. And Ewan has always wanted to go through South America. But then Ewan moved to the States, and I was over here, and Ewan became very busy. I was very busy. Ewan, funny enough, spent a lot of time over here making movies, but I was always away doing something else. And so our relationship kind of just drifted along, and we spoke to each other, but we were all busy. And then around 2016, I had a huge motorcycle crash and smashed myself to pieces.
Yeah.
And did some real damage to my legs, which is sort of injuries that I sort of had to live with forever, I suppose. And
you wrote a book about it.
I wrote a book about it. Yeah, Long Way Back. You know.
That's on my Kindle. I read it.
Oh, oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, it's great.
And sorry, that's my alarm to say that I have to ring you. So
that was a pretty sexy looking photo there. Was that Pierce Brosnan or you?
Yeah. Well, I had a stand-in, you know, and someone who looks buff, you know, and Piers very kindly stepped in for me, but you know, an old friend of the family, you know, but then, you know, because I was stuck in London, Ewan was over here filming, and he came over to stay for a few days, and ended up staying a month, and we kind of, as best friends do, you just sort of reconnect, and our relationship just carried on from where it left off, and we just came along, and then we were talking about doing another one, and then we invited Russ and Dave over, who are our business partners and producers, and we're sitting there having a barbecue in the garden, and we're saying, look, we want to do this, and Russ just said, you know, have you thought about electric? And we both kind of looked at each other and thought, well, okay, you know, actually, yeah, well, you know, why not? And so we. So being Ewan and I, we just sort of threw ourselves into it without really realizing what that actually entailed. And then before you knew it, we were sitting at the bottom of Argentina, apparently in one of the worst winters since 1974. So being delayed 4 or 5 days because we were in snowdrifts before we could leave. So we it was a whirlwind. Yeah,
you know, it's funny. I sort of had the feeling that the reason you chose electric is you didn't know any better, and because
I'd like to look at it as being ever optimistic and gung ho, and you know, why not? And no one's done it before. Woohoo! Let's do it. Type of thing.
But isn't it sort of true that some of the greatest achievements in life come because you didn't know what you were getting into? And
oh yeah, I mean, I have to say that first. I mean, it was funny. In actual fact, you know. When we turned up, and not only did we have 2 electric motorcycles, but we decided to have 2 electric support vehicles as well, the Rivians, and neither Harley or Rivian were actually in production of any of these vehicles at the time. So and Harley-Davidson had to quite heavily modify the LiveWire for us in order for it to work.
Yeah, so that's actually one of my questions we could get to. There's a motorcycle audience you're addressing now, and I'm fascinated, but it seemed like you took 2 street bikes, and then when you were going through Bolivia, you're going through ruddy gravel and everything else. And I didn't know, you didn't explain in the series what the modifications were. I could see some of them, but like suspension, the front wheel was still 17 inches.
Yeah, well, what we did was we you know, it's funny because when we were looking at electric motorcycles, I think Ewan and I just assumed that the big manufacturers like Honda and Harley, Kawasaki and Yamaha and all these people would have electric bikes, you know, in the advanced stages, but no one really had anything that was suitable, and you know, there was always that you know, Zero were we looked at them, but that didn't really work. And then Harley-Davidson came along, and they'd been working on this project for about 6 years. And we said to them, look, we think you guys are great. And the whole idea of saying to people, you know, when you stop to charge your bike, to plug it in, you say, we've got these electric bikes, where you're going? Oh, we're just going from the bottom of Argentina back to LA. And, you know, and people go, wow, on electric bikes, are you stupid? And then, they would say, well, who built them? And you'd say, well, they're Harley-Davidsons. And people would go, what? Harley-Davidsons? Are you kidding me? Yeah. And so, but they did an amazing job. But they, at the beginning, there's a little bit in the film where we talk about, you know, the modification. So they put the Pan American front end on, which is their new adventure bike. And they beefed up the back. They put a new tail. They put a new tail seat for us, which had panniers. And they beefed up, and then they took it out and tested it to make sure that it was you know, that it was rugged and it was okay. And they have to say they really set it up beautifully. You know, that dark art of, you know, when people say, you know, this rebound and the this and the this and the that, and you're going, no, I know all that, but you don't really. And they've done a beautiful job for us. And so they really put a lot of effort into it.
Can I interrupt you here for just 1 minute? You rode the
Sure.
car in 2006. I mean, you're the genuine. I mean, you really ride. You're not just a celebrity tourist on a motorcycle. I mean, and that's available. It's a streaming series of like 6 episodes. Russ was involved. Your crew was involved in filming that and everything.
Yeah, Russ and Claudio Von Planto, our cameraman, who's been with us on a lot of trips.
I wanted to be Claudio on this whole trip. I wanted to be, but that's beautiful.
It's amazing. I mean, I did the Dakar Rally. I did 5 days and then broke my hands, sadly. But I was 80th out of 260, so wow. I felt very proud of myself for that. Yeah. I mean, it's the most. When you go on trips and you say to people, we're going to Bolivia and Colombia and all these people go, "Ooh, that's a dangerous place." And you go, "Is it?" And they go, "Oh, yes." And you go, "Have you been there?" And they go, "No." And so they're just assuming that it's, and 99% of the time, all these countries are actually wonderful. But then when you hear stories about the Dakar Rally, all of them, no matter how gruesome, and there were some real gruesome stories about, people who are surviving or not surviving the Dakar Rally, and all of those stories are true. So when you go on the Dakar Rally, it's true, and they're kind of dumbing them down, the stories, sort of making them not so, because otherwise just people wouldn't believe you. But, so I can't remember where we were now. That's my age.
You were talking about the Harley-Davidsons and how they come up with the Pan American front end and so on. So, and you were talking about the dark arts of rebound and all that with the shocks.
And suspension and stuff. And I think we all know what feels right with a bike, and the trick for this bike was to be able to, like an adventure bike, was to feel good on the road, feel good in the twisties, and then feel good in the deep, gravelly, rutted sand that we came across in Bolivia with the most unbelievable corrugated, unbelievable corrugation. I think that was our real test. I think for off-road was Colombia. We arrived from Chile into Colombia and about 12,000 feet altitude, and then just went straight from nice tarmac to just deep, gravelly, rutted corrugation roads. I mean, that those roads when you go into the desert and there's about 20 lanes that you can choose from, and then every lane that you're on, you wish you were on the other lane, and you're thinking, "Oh, that looks nicer over there." Then you finally get the nerve to cross all those big, sand rush, and you finally get over to the other side and realize it's worse, then you've got to go all the way back again. And we were riding on these roads, and really challenging roads, and I remember just looking around and thinking, hang on a minute, we're on electric motorcycles here, and then you start thinking, oh God, well, where's we got to get to this place, we've got to get there to be able to plug in, and you're looking out the most stunning countryside you've ever seen, the most beautiful desert, and then just hoping that you're going in the right direction to hit that tiny little town that's in the middle of nowhere. So it was a real challenge.
Starting in Argentina, Ushuaia, I remember you guys walking around for 3 or 4 days on these icy roads and sliding around and thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to start off on these. And Charley's got a leg with rods and screws in it and everything else. And it's like, I hope these guys don't go down right in the beginning. But it was always,
I think that was, one of my sort of, I think both you and I are quite optimistic, and, just to, get on with things, and I never really let those, because I had a second injury as well in between the one from 2016. I had in 18, I really smashed myself to pieces in 18 as well in South Africa, and I snapped my forearm in half and bent it backwards, and all the bones came out, and 2 plates on there, and a plate on my collarbone, and I broke my pelvis and had to have that plated as well. So there was a big head injury as well. I'd never had concussion before. I use that now as an excuse a lot with my wife when I forgot to do something. She goes, "You forgot to do it." And I go, "Oh, I don't know. It must have been that knock on the head in 2018." But but and secretly, when we were sliding around, secretly I was thinking, you know, I'm not sure, you know, I hope I'm not going to let everybody down, you know, and you know, find that I don't have the strength. I mean, I felt strong, but you know, standing up on the foot pegs for long periods of time is not very easily done, and you know, and from these sort of lasting injuries. So there was a lot going on, and you know, and you're just thinking, when will this snow ever stop in order to start this journey? You know, and the more you don't, the more you're delayed, you know, the more you don't want to start, because you know, you become institutionalized, and a bit like COVID lockdown. You know, we all got locked down here, and you know, you don't want to go into lockdown, and you don't want to leave lockdown, because you know, of all these sort of feelings. But I have to say, that morning when we did decide to go, and we put all our gear on, and you're sort of sweating up, and you know, that feeling of you just want to go, and everyone's asking you questions, and someone gave you something that you forgot to pack, and you're thinking, well, I don't know where I'm going to put it, and the sweat is dribbling down the back of your neck, and then finally you head out, and it was the most perfect day, and in actual fact, that one day everything went right. We found the charging in the middle of the day, plugged in, sat in this bakery, had a great time, spoke to the guy who owned it, had a lovely time, and then headed to the hotel, and plugged in really easily. And then more or less the other 100 and something days after that, nothing ever quite went to plan.
Yeah, well, it was funny. First of all, kudos to Claudio for the drone footage. It was just beautiful throughout Patagonia and Bolivia and everywhere. It was just, the drone footage was really a big plus. But you talked in the planning stages, the long planning stages, like 8 months or something like that.
Yeah.
You talked in the planning stages about how the electric bikes might change the character a little bit, because you couldn't just pitch a tent anywhere out in the middle of nowhere. You had to plug in, and that changed where you could sleep. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things that we didn't want to do was for you know, for that spirit of adventure, and that freedom to be, you know, to be compromised, and when we you know, we started off, and then I think we kind of, when we came to grips with the whole charging of it all, and the whole thing of, you know, range anxiety syndrome that everybody seems to have when you first start going electric. It was a little bit like when petrol first came along. You know, people were very reluctant about going from horse to petrol. People were very adamant that it was never going to take off, you know. You would leave your house going somewhere with fuel and thinking, well, I can get there, but will there be fuel when I get there, and will I be able to get back? And you know, and originally, when you certainly in Europe, to buy petrol, you had to go to a chemist to buy your petrol in those days, and people were quite anti cars in those days, and there wasn't the infrastructure. And I think that was it. It was a bit like that in South and Central America. There was no charging infrastructure, so that had its drawbacks, or had its thing of learning how to deal with that. But once we kind of got over that, and then started having an understanding and a bit more freedom, then that gave us a bit more freedom. I don't think it gave us the full freedom that we had in the past, but you know, there's in South America, there's a lot more campsites, there's a lot more of those places, and all those places have power, and everybody everywhere has power. So, you know, we had a little bit. I don't think we had as much as we had in the past, but then our adventure became slightly different anyway, because the adventure of it became about, you know, meeting a whole different group of people, because we were not just going to petrol stations and filling up and moving on. We were going into towns, looking at a business, or looking at someone's home, or looking at a restaurant and asking if we could plug in there during the day for an hour or so to top up. And then you were meeting all sorts of different people. I mean, we would plug into restaurants and places, and we would cut the power and plunge everybody into darkness, and you know, people were so helpful, and even though we plunged their houses into darkness, people all found it very funny, and were still very fascinated about the whole electric of it all. So I think in some ways it changed but in other ways it made it completely different, and gave us a very different experience. And neither of them are bad. They were all super interesting.
It's funny. I reviewed an electric bike. I had it for a couple of months, and I had that range anxiety too. But there's a 110 volt cord, and here in America, you just knock on somebody's house in a residential neighborhood, and so. But even the charging infrastructure for that here in Silicon Valley was a little bit spotty. So
yeah. I mean, it's listen. I mean, we're sitting here now talking about. I mean, one of the things that was amazing when we finally went through South and Central America and Mexico and then finally got into the border, our first day in America, we were doing 150-mile days, but we were managing to do a bit more when we started to have this ability to be able to get this system where we could fast charge from the Rivian to the motorcycles, and that was a bit of a game changer as well. So that gave us more freedom.
2-hour charge, right?
Yeah, and then we crossed the border, and we kind of finished the first day. We started off late, and we still had quite a way to go, and we headed to our first fast charger. And bearing in mind, Ewan and I had only ridden these motorbikes for about maybe a maximum of 2 hours before we got to the bottom of Argentina. So we'd never charged the bikes. We'd never really ridden them.
That's crazy.
They were all prototype. We'd never done anything with them. We'd never packed them. We'd never put panniers on them. Nothing. We had no idea, what to expect. And so we got to the first chargers, and we plugged in, and it was saying like 40 minutes till full. Sitting there, and the only way I could equate it is that if you turned up at an escalator for the first time in your life and looked at it, and you're looking at the escalator thinking, oh my gosh, these stairs are moving, and you were completely discombobulated by it. Oh my, look at this. And we were going crazy. And that day, even though we left late, I think we did 230 miles that day. And so it is actually very durable to do 250 miles a day pretty easily with fast chargers.
Yeah, that's really great. So a lot has been made of the fact that the two of you are celebrities, and you have the support crew and so on. And so it was interesting when you go to plug in at places, it looked like some of the time you guys were completely anonymous. I mean, that one shot that Ewan took with the diary cam when he woke up and got out of his tent in the morning, and he said, over there is the septic tank, and over here is my tent. And you just
that was a bad, one thing it was the classic mistake of not surveying where you're going to put your tent up. It's a classic mistake, and Ewan and I should have known much better than to stick our tent so close to a cesspit.
It was funny, but how much of the trip were you kind of anonymous and people didn't know who you were, and you could, like when you'd show up at a cafe and plug in, did they?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time, really, I think, in big cities and big towns, there was a couple of times where it was pretty crazy, and, Ewan is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And people, and Moulin Rouge and Train Spotting.
Winner,
these are big iconic movies, and so in big towns and stuff, people got kind of feverish. But once you're out in the cuds and staying in different places, people don't really notice. And I think 60% of the world lives in far less than we have.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time people are just getting on with their lives and don't have the luxury of cinema, don't have the luxury of just driving down the road to the mall or people people live lives, and they live very different lives, and I think us up in the West and in the civilized world, can be often quite judgmental about how people live, and we can just on face value we can say, well, look how they live. But actually, you know, everybody lives the best they can, and everybody, you know, have cultures and all sorts of different things that you know are no better than anyone else. You know, and that's what's so lovely about these trips is that you can go along and you can meet these people, and you end up we ended up in that campsite with the terrible sorry, are you there?
I'm here.
So we ended up in that campsite. So I'm going to just plug my phone in
so it doesn't go to sleep. The screen doesn't go to sleep.
Well, no, it's the battery doesn't go out.
Oh, I see.
So we had so, you know, we went to this place and the campsite was awful, and we thought, this is terrible, and we're not going to find any food. And then we set up, and then the owner said, oh, look, I've just made some food. Do you want to come and join us? And we sat down and had one of the best meals we've had on the whole trip, and went to bed with full bellies, which was a bonus that night.
And you're pretty, you know something about food. You were a contestant on Celebrity Chef, right?
Master Chef, yeah.
Oh, Master Chef?
Do you have Celebrity Master Chef? Do you have Master Chef in the States?
I guess so. I haven't watched it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love cooking. My mother was an amazing cook. My father is a film director. He directed films like Deliverance, Excalibur, and Hope and Glory, and Emerald Forest, and lots of fabulous movies, Point Blank. And
Emerald Forest, you starred in Emerald Forest, didn't you?
Yeah, Emerald Forest, I was in. Yeah, I was. You know, but that was and my mother, she always entertained, and she was always entertaining people. And there was always every time you sat down to lunch or dinner, there was always people. I remember looking down the table and thinking, who are all these people? You know, and then as 4 children, we were all expected to help cook and serve and sit down with the grown-ups and entertain. And that was what we did. And so I think I got the love of cooking from my mother. And anyway, I came second, or joint second, I should say.
Wow, good
Chef.
for you. Talking about your dad, can you talk about the photo you recreated in the Panama Canal?
Oh yes, yeah. My father made a film. It was a lovely film with Pierce Brosnan and
Jamie Lee Curtis.
And Jamie Lee Curtis, and it was called The Tailor of Panama with Jeffrey Rush. And it was a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a very funny film. And Pierce Brosnan plays this kind of washed up 00 kind of character, 007 kind of character, and almost starts the Panama War. And anyway, the three of them are on location, and they're swimming in the Panama Canal, and I wanted to recreate that. So when we went to Panama, we interviewed this lady, amazing woman who oversaw the whole building of these new locks in the Panama Canal.
She's one of the chief engineers, right?
Yeah, she was the head honcho. And she'd started right at the bottom when she was 17 years old, working on the Panama Canal, and became one of the top 3 CEOs of the company. And amazing woman.
She was fantastic on camera.
Yeah, she was wonderful and real proper lady. Yeah, so I then swam in the thing, and then we got all these kind of sort of people saying, you know, it's illegal to swim in the Panama Canal because of boats. And then what I didn't realize is that it's full of crocodiles.
Oh.
And people have been taken away by crocodiles. Now there I was happily swimming.
Wow.
In this thing.
And there was a detail in there that you recreated, the cargo ship in the background.
Yes. Yeah. We had to wait for a big ship to come past so that the cargo ship was in the back. And there was a huge, we didn't realize that, but the wake of the ship came along, and this massive wave came and almost took out Claudia, the cameraman, and Russ and a couple of others. It was very funny.
So you were talking earlier about how life can be hard for some people, and you got to meet a lot of them. Talk about the border crossing where the 2 teens were in a holding pattern waiting to get to Chile because they had to flee Venezuela and leave their parents.
Yeah, I mean, there's some real tragic stories. So there's a lot of, from Venezuela, there's a lot of migration because of what's happened there, and it's almost impossible to live there. And so these families and people left everything behind, left parents behind. Some have left children and all sorts of people behind, or left parents behind. So we were in the northern border of Peru, and these people had found themselves stuck in the border. We were doing a UNICEF project there. We did 3 projects with UNICEF.
Because are you both ambassadors for UNICEF?
Yeah, we're both ambassadors since we did Long Way Round. We've been ambassadors. We've involved UNICEF in all our projects. And
Ewan did a BBC 2-episode series in 2012 where he flew into Africa to try to help with vaccines.
Yeah, the cold train, they call it.
Yeah.
So basically you get UNICEF and along with a lot of other NGOs inoculate 60% of the world's children. And which is you can imagine quite a
massive.
Task,
And
a lot of these vaccinations have to stay cold, so people pick them up in chillers, and then they do this incredible journey, sometimes 2 or 3 days, to get out to remote villages to be able to inoculate people. And he followed how that works.
Wow.
And so we were doing a project with UNICEF on the border, and these people had found themselves in no man's land. And they weren't allowed to go in because they didn't have the right stamp, or they didn't have a stamp out of the Venezuelan stamp out, so they wouldn't let them come in to Peru without the stamp. And then the only way they could get the stamp would be to fly back to Venezuela to get the stamp, and then fly back to Peru. But they left everything behind, so they were stuck and hoping that they would be able to get from the kindness of the border patrol and the border customs, to be able to get a transit visa to be able to get to the capital in order to be able to.
But they'd been there something like 48 days.
Yeah, 48 days.
One of you asked, do they miss their parents or something like that? And the 2 kids just burst into tears and couldn't talk anymore. It's moving.
It's heartbreaking. And then, we didn't have time to show it, but then we must have interviewed, 8 or 9 different families. There were just a ton of them there, and all of them had this. There was one lady who was there. She was with her 2 children and her grandmother, and her grandmother wasn't very well. Her youngest child had issues and had an illness and needed vaccine, and she didn't have any vaccine. She was starting to run out of this vaccine that she needed for her child. It was just heartbreaking. It really was.
There were a couple of times in the series where I started to choke up and cry, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
But the ultimate one was Ewan's daughter, Jamin. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, Jamian is Ewan's third daughter, who we met in Mongolia, and on a UNICEF project, and then we all fell in love with her. Sorry.
At an orphanage when she was tiny.
At an orphanage, yeah. We were in Ulaanbaatar in an orphanage, and we just happened to be filming her and heard her story, and we kind of all fell in love with her. And then after a very long process, Ewan ended up adopting her, and she came out with us and traveled with us a little bit on the trip, and it was lovely. I mean, that's his story, so he should tell it really, but she's very close to all of our hearts, to Russ and Dave and Ewan and myself and Claudio and Jimmy Simak, who was one of the cameramen on the film. The 6 of us have been on all 3 of them, and
that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's very difficult. It's difficult to put these little projects into your TV show, and we want to put them in so that they feel natural, that we've done it for purpose, but as part of our journey, and I think I think it's a great opportunity to be able to highlight some of the issues that go on around the world, and it's a reflection on. I always reflect on how lucky that we are and where we live, and it's all about just being where you're born and what you're born into, and what goes on. And we were doing some, and one of the other projects we were doing with UNICEF, we were doing gang related stories about kids getting stuck into gangs, and that's horrendous.
Was that in Mexico?
No, that was down in Guatemala, but they we were that was extraordinary. They sucker these kids in, saying we'll give you a mobile phone, we'll give you a smartphone, and we'll give you jeans, and we'll give you this, that, and the other, and they take them, and then they ask them to do more and more and more, and then if they don't do it, or if they want to get out, they'll drag their parents into a room and threaten to kill them in front of them, and sometimes do kill them in front of them. So they'll kill one of the parents in front of them, and then you so to get them out is very difficult, and so UNICEF are there to create spaces for these kids to be able to go so they can be kids, and then at the same time they clean up the area and get people who used to be in gangs from around the world to fly them in to help the kids get out. So, and we have those problems. In the States we have huge. In the United States, we have huge problems with certain cities. We have huge problems in states. In Europe and Britain here, we have huge problems with gangs and knife. We have a lot of knife crime in this country, and so we all have it.
Yeah, wow. So one thing I was curious about as the episodes rolled on is how you're feeling about. So you have a wonderful wife, Olivia. How you're feeling about being away from your family so long, and how do they feel when you're out on these trips? Because you've had a few accidents, and I was nervous as I was watching you. And I can imagine. It doesn't. The riding the bikes and stuff doesn't worry me so much. I think for me, for my to get better, my rehabilitation and my physiotherapy and my therapy kind of from my mind was always about that I'm going to get back on the motorbike and I'm going to carry on doing what I do. I woke up the next morning after smashing my legs to pieces, and was very lucky to keep my leg. And I woke up and I'd broken my hand as well. So I had 3 limbs out of action, and I was lying in bed the next morning feeling pretty bad. And I banged my butt cheek on the really high pavement. I glanced my butt cheek on the high pavement, and that was actually more painful than my shattered leg or my broken ankle. And anyway, I woke up in the morning and I saw these 3 limbs, and I started to feel really sorry for myself. And I was thinking, God, if only I'd left 2 minutes earlier or left 2 minutes later, this would never have happened. And anyway, I looked over the side of the bed next door. I was sharing a bed with someone, and that guy was in a terrible state. I mean, really bad. And I looked at myself, and I looked at him. I thought, actually, this isn't that bad. And I actually felt quite cheery about myself. Wow. I thought, actually, this isn't so bad, Wow. And I think from that point on, I thought, I'm not going to let this accident define me. I'm gonna define it, and this is a line in the sand, and I'm going to step over that line, and my future is there, and I'm going to get back on the motorbike, and I'm going to make another TV show or whatever. Good for you. That's amazing. And
that's what I did, but having said that, there were moments when we're going through Bolivia thinking, I'm not sure about this.
So I wanted to ask you about that. There were actually 3 motorcycles on the trip. Claudio's riding a petrol-powered Harley. And how was he? So when you're in Bolivia, you and Ewan were obviously in a lot of distress, talking in the helmet audio as you're crossing from one rut to another, saying, "Whoo, made it!" And then you had some crashes. And so, Can you talk about that? And I'd also like to know how Claudio did.
Yeah, Claudio, he just gets on with it. He's amazing. He'll ride all day. He'll get the camera out, start filming. I mean, what that guy did with drones, I mean, it's amazing. When you look at Long Way Round, there were no GoPros or there was nothing like that. We developed this whole system about having little cameras on our helmets and being able to record and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was non-existent, and we had a camera on the bike. It was extraordinary what we sort of came up with. And then in those days, if you wanted an aerial shot, you'd have to book a helicopter, and you would get a piece of road, and you would wait for the helicopter to turn up. When you heard it coming, you would race down the road, up, back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, and then the helicopter would fly off, and that was your aerial, you know. Or Claudia, we'd stop something. Claudia would have to walk up to the top of the hill to get a wide, and now Claudia had this little drone is about this size, and he just whipped out, and then suddenly from being in the camera with Ewan and I on the bikes and Claudia filming us, suddenly we were able to through one shot be able to just hover here, and the two bikes would come past and the drone would follow, and then as we carried on, the drone would just lift up and then just reveal where we were. I mean, amazing. That guy, he's tough, you know. I mean, he cut his teeth in as a camera journalist in Afghanistan during the Russian invasion.
Oh wow!
He was out there. You know,
Crazy.
He thought I want to be a cameraman in the war zone, so he bought a ticket to Afghanistan.
Wow!
Had no idea what he was doing.
Wow, that's
and then
crazy.
he interviewed Bin Laden when nobody knew who he was, and he came back and said, "Look, this guy's crazy." You know, and it's an extraordinary man. Very like, and then we were saying to me,
this guy's crazy, so he fits right in with you guys.
Crazy, yeah, he'll fit in perfectly.
Yeah,
and he did. He just slotted in.
That's funny.
And I remember we were telling him that we were going to be camping all the time, and we're going to be out in Russia. And this was the first one, and it was going to be really tough. And then I can imagine him going, "Yeah, whatever." You know, I just spent 4 months with rebels in Afghanistan. You know,
being shot at.
And then at the end of it, at the end of Long Way Around, he turned to me. He said, "Charley," he said, that was hard."
Oh, really? Wow.
So, yeah, he said the same thing in the Dakar Rally. I remember when I broke both my hands, I fell off the motorbike halfway through the day and got back on and carried on riding. I think for about 4.5 hours with 2 broken hands, thinking I'd get to the end of the day and I'd fix my hands and I'll be all right. And clearly I wasn't. And anyway, the next day I had to wash myself because I stank from the whole day's riding. And they said, "Oh, there's a nice shower here. You'll be able to get some showers." And I turned up and I opened the shower, and there was a bucket with a cup. I thought, with 2 hands in casts, and I went, "Claudio!"
Oh no!
And I'll leave the rest up to you guys.
To our imagination.
So he was amazing, and so his, you know, so that gave a real element to the story that we'd never had before.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm very interested in photography, and so the drone shots in particular were great. But all the GoPro shots, the audio when you guys were struggling through Bolivia and everything, it was really great. We only have you for 30 or 40 minutes, and I'm probably past the edge of that. So the thing I wanted to ask about is, you're 2 celebrities, and you have this big support crew. So some people say, well, is that really an adventure like we ride, you know, because us normal people, you know, we don't get to play the Obi-Wan Kenobi card to get across the border to Colombia or something like that. And
that rarely worked.
Yeah, it did in Colombia, right? That was the one time that it worked.
Yeah.
But the thing that I took away was just how you're like schoolboys laughing about the lake named Titicaca and how would have joked about that in school, but you even joke about that now, and your best buddies, and just the love of being out there and motorcycling. But then what was interesting for me to see is when somebody would recognize you guys, especially Ewan, like he'd go up to Machu Picchu, he dreamed of being there forever, and all he could think about is, I get to see Machu Picchu, and fog is clearing, and these dramatic images and everything. But he's surrounded by all these tourists who want selfies with him. And I thought, I wonder what that must be. It must be tough. It's turning into a photo session. But he seemed to be a good sport about it. Like when you got mobbed, I guess it was a Star Wars club or something. You got mobbed at a cafe.
Yeah, sure.
outside, and he just spent, I don't know how long he spent taking selfies with people. And then afterwards he said, you know, I was happy to make them happy.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and I think one of the people there said, you know, Guayaquil was the place, and there's another one we used to giggle at a lot as well, is Why I Kill. That's the only way you can remember how to pronounce that extraordinary name. But I think, you know, I think he feels the sort of same way as I do. I remember when my father made a film with John Voight a while ago called The Deliverance. And John Voight has done a couple of movies with Dad since then, and they've become sort of lifelong buddies. And I remember, it was fantastic. That was the first movie I was ever in. Actually, was Deliverance. I wasn't the banjo player, just in case you wondered. And I played the little boy at the end of the movie. John Voight goes back to at the end. He goes to his wife, and there's a little boy sitting on a sofa, and that was me. I was given a tricycle. My father said, "If you sit on that sofa with that bloke, I'll give you a tricycle." And that's maybe where the love of my motorbikes came from. But I was at an awards ceremony with John and John Voight, and we'd had dinner, and we were crossing over the road to go to the place where the ceremony was. And he said, "Oh, we should go now." And I said, "But it's too early." He goes, No, we'll just go now. And he walked across the street, and of course he attracted a lot of attention because of who he is. And he spent all the time and just spoke to everybody. And I said, "God, don't you ever get fed up with that?" And he goes, "No." He said, "You know, I just leave a little bit of extra time because I know it's going to happen. And, you know, if it wasn't for all of these people, then, you know, he wouldn't be there anyway." And I think Ewan feels very much the same way, you know, to take a little bit of time out of your life. And, you know, and as the people said in the town, not that many A-listers come down that way. And so they were just super stoked and you know, he made their day. And you know, he's a nice guy, Ewan. He's extremely generous and extremely kind.
That's the thing that just radiates through all the 10 episodes I saw, was both of you love the dogs, the stray dogs, and bend down and pet them, and the horses as they run by you say, "Hello, darling." And it just, the little children, the tribes you visited, the schools, UNICEF, and so on. We didn't get to talk about reforesting jungles, environmental things.
Yeah, but that was lovely. But you know, that's the fun of it. And I think, and I hope that, you know, that, you know, and in the past of the thing is that if you've ever traveled or ever gone on holiday or had a little mini adventure, and an adventure doesn't have to be from South America to Los Angeles. It can be, you know, a weekend in the mountains behind your house, or you know, wherever it is. It doesn't matter. And when things go wrong a little bit, you know, and you need a little bit of help, or something happens at the time, it can be frustrating, but when you look back on it, those are the things and the times that you always remember. And I hope that if anybody's done a little bit of traveling, they'll identify a little bit with what Ewan and I went through, because I think we were just going through what everybody else goes through, you know, trying to find a place to stay.
Yeah,
you know, trying to plug in.
Yeah, being trapped out there. I mean, when Ewan ran out of power.
Yeah, twice. I just have to say twice.
Oh, yeah.
I was zero. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not saying anything.
And you claim that's because you're a better rider. But it was
I don't remember saying that.
It's interesting to, you know, you trying to make, I hope I'm not giving away a spoiler, but trying to make a ferry that's getting dark, and Ewan's stuck out there, and so they go back with the Rivian, and he holds on to the side of the Rivian, and it's pretty good riding.
But that's and that's the thing, you know. We used to, what we would do is, you know, Ewan and I would and Claudia would try and spend as much time with just the three of us as we could, and then, you know, borders and boat crossings and stuff like that, and UNICEF projects. We would meet up, because we would, and especially on the UNICEF projects, you need as many cameras as you can, so that you're disturbing the children as least as possible. So you get it done as quickly as possible, so that you're not sort of interfering with their lives too much. And border crossings, because you have carnets. I don't know how much people know about carnets, but they're a bane of your life. You have to sort of sign all this paperwork to go into a country to say that you're taking your bike and your film equipment in with you, and that you guarantee that you're going to take it all out with you and not sell it in the country.
I see.
And that's sort of what a Kane does. And so the minute you show paperwork to anybody, then the whole thing slows down.
Oh, I see. One final comment, and that is, It was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. You guys did such a great job. I hope it's a huge hit. And one of the things I'll take away is a comment that Ewan made during some of those frustrating interruptions, which was, the interruptions are the journey.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good line. Thank you.
It's a good mantra.
Thank you.
All right. Pleasure to meet you.
All right,
pleasure.
Charley, Chris.
I love your framing as well. Really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate both of you, gentlemen. Have a nice weekend.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Have a lovely weekend. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. I hope you'll like and subscribe. And if you'll write a comment, I'll read them all and I'll respond to them. Let's see them.